Happy New Year, guys. Well, welcome back to a new episode, a fresh episode, a fresh start to this new year. Hope you had a great last year. So, this time we will start off with one of the problems and its solution that which we had to uh, resolve this year, which was having an issue with the callback or the token notification of realm. So whatever we had identified in that episode was having an error when you were doing a deletion. So let me just show you what had happened at that time. Let's run the app. So the app is up, and if you try to delete, let's say, an intermediate row, we had a duplication issue. This was mainly happening, if you remember, because whenever we trigger a deletion, it actually inserts the last indexed item to wherever the deletion had happened. So for the same reason, we had a problem with updating the view model, which was actually getting corrupted. So one of the solutions for this is to apply a sort in the query. So let's go back and see what we can do here. We have the database fetch. Let's go back there. Right now it's just a plain query, and that's the result set that we are getting. So what we can try doing is to add a sort to it. Let's say if I have a created at index or created at property, we can have a sort. We can add a sorted by key path to this created at. So this in turn will associate a sort, and then it will not trigger that two callbacks, or maybe if you call it as one insertion and two deletions happening. If you want to check that issue, then you might have to refer an earlier tutorial where I had discussed about it. So for the time being, let's run the applications once more and see what's going on. So we have all the tutorials. We delete the second item. Let's delete this indexed item, and we don't see that problem anymore because it's only triggering now one delete callback. So that's resolved now. So today's main interest of discussion is to use RxSwift in Alamofire callbacks. So not just Alamofire, even if you are using a regular HTTP URL session based approach, even there you can use it. So RxSwift can be used to respond back to an API call. Let's say in this case we have this completion block which sends back the response. We can use even RxSwift to do the same. So to do that, let's modify a little bit of code here. Let me get rid of all this, and let's capture the response. So let me call it response data. This is my response data, and the cases. Come on, where is my autocomplete? Okay. So let's add the cases required. So the first case is, give me anything. Okay, it should be response data dot result, and in the case you will get success and failure. So let's handle the success part, which will be my result, or let's call it value, the result value. And the failure, we call it as error. So we have handled the response part for the JSON result, which is the value and error. So let's comment this part out because we are not going to use this completion block anymore. And for the success case, let's check for even the status code. Let's call it status code is equal to, and I am only interested in receiving a success code of 200, let's say. And if I don't get a 200, I can always say that this is not the response I expected. So anyway, if there is an error, it will come to even the error block. So there we can always say something went wrong. Okay, so we have the success part ready. Next step is to parse this. Even before sending it through the response, let's use Swiftify JSON to parse this data. Let me call that as response JSON, and just pass it to that's my response JSON, which is now Swiftify JSON, Swifty JSON. It's called Swifty JSON. It's not Swiftify. Swifty JSON response type. So this will receive the value as which is of any data type and then convert it into the required JSON format. So that's done now, and we are at a stage where we can introduce RxSwift observables. So let's see what we need to do. First thing, let's modify this. So let me invoke the observable type, Rx observable. I have a code piece here. So this is my observable return type which will be created. I have an observable created, and this is required, otherwise it will give an error. Disposable, it needs a disposable type. So this is my basic structure to return an observable type. So all I need to do is to modify the result type here. So I don't need the completion block anymore. Remove that. Okay, this gives an error because RxSwift is not there. So I include RxSwift. Now observable will be identified. So that's sorted now. And let me modify this. So expected return type is an observable type of type, let's say I am passing back JSON response, the Swifty JSON response. So this is my response type. So the similar modification I have to do in my protocol as well. I'll get rid of this and then make this as the response type, and also make the change here where in the type alias it is observable JSON. So that's pretty much done here. Fetch all to do's is returning an observable type, and this is my structure for creating and returning an observable, and within that structure let's move the API call. That's the place where I just move it within the create construct and keep the response disposable create here. That's all done. And Next thing is to have this as a request object, so that let's say if there is a problem with this object getting disposed and the API request has not gone through, then we can always call the cancel and stop the request. So that's also pretty much done. So what do we have right now? We have the URL, and within the observable we have the API request, and once we receive the response, we were handling it using the completion block. But instead of that, now we will be using the observable create whatever we have created and then respond back with on next. So if you are not aware, observable works with these three: on next, on error, and on completed. This is the basic thing which you need to know about an observable, whether it be as published subject or plain observable or even a variable. This is the basic thing that we need to just know, that you need to, it will have an on next, on error, and on completed. On next is nothing but for sending out signals whenever a data is received. Let's say you want to send out signals. In this case it will be a JSON object. So this is my response JSON. This is what I will pass when a response is received from an API Alamofire request. On error is whenever you encounter an error. Let's say in this case, if this is not what I expected as a response, then in that case I can always return it as an error. Can be anything. This will trigger an error in the place where it will subscribe. Subscription part we'll just see in a bit. So this is my error, and even here we can include it like whenever you encounter an error, it triggers an error. So one of the things that will happen with an observable whenever it encounters an error is that it will stop sending signals and it will dispose of the observable. So that is something which RxSwift will take care. We don't need to do much. But whenever we receive, let's say, a response, after we have sent it back, let's say this API request is only sending one response, then as soon as it is received, we have to call on completed so that the observable gets disposed. If you keep it suspended without calling this, then this might not really get collected, or it will not be disposed of. So this is something we need to take care. Observable on completed after you receive the response. So if you are expecting multiple responses, don't call this. If you are sure that this is the only response after which you need to dispose, then call on completed. So this is what this structure is like. So basically this is what you need to do, this much, that's it, nothing more. You have whatever we had as a request previously is included within an observable.create with the disposable created, where you can always cancel your request whenever the object gets collected, let's say. And within the success and the failure cases, you just need to send either on next or on completed. This will handle sending signal back to where it is being subscribed. That's it. You are done with including observable within an API call. Let's build and modify the existing one. So this was the earlier version where it was receiving the callback and then sending it back. So right now, if we are, let's say, modifying our function, so this is my shared instance dot fetch all to dos. So now if you see that it is of type observable JSON. So we are, type is an observable JSON. So we can call it observable to do, or maybe to do's observable. So that creates my observable object which is sending my request but if I have to listen to the response, I will have to subscribe to it. It's the only thing you need to do. That's my JSON response. I receive it here. If there is an error, I receive it in this block, and if it gets completed, this will get called. Let me also call the dispose back, so that whenever it's being done with, the subscription is disposed of. So these 4 blocks we will get. All I have to do is, first thing, let's print my result, which is JSON response, which I receive from the API call completion success block. Next thing is, if there is an error, I print that out. So maybe I can say to-dos request failed with error. And the next thing, I can always print out just to see what's going on with my completion. Request completed, I can call, and then my to-dos request is disposed. That's it. So we are subscribing to all these changes now, and let's move this functionality from this function where it was receiving a data and then converting it to JSON. So this step we already done in the response part. So only thing that we need is this, which we can always move to the response side, and instead of this to-dos dictionary, let's point to the JSON response of to-dos to array. So that's it. We have pretty much moved the feature here, and so let's get rid of this function, or maybe just comment it out, so that, because it's like the regular approach with the completion block where we were sending it to save to the database. Here it's like using the observable RxSwift version, where once it receives the subscription result, it saves it. If there is an encounter error, it gets logged, and we are calling the completion if the request is completed, and it will also trigger the disposed. So let's see all this, whether everything gets triggered. So let's also keep breakpoints here, what should happen on success and everything. And let me just stop this. Where is that hardware home? Okay. Compile and see once. All good. So this is my request. This will trigger a response. So let's run and see. The app is running now. It triggers any API call, request is passed, and response is received here now. So let's see for the result. It's 200, and we are receiving the value here. Same thing. And the next step is we are sending it through on next, and it should trigger. Yes, so the subscription came back to on next. Wherever it is subscribed, it came here, and the response is received here. So it got printed. If you see in the console, that response is received on the subscriber side. So the next thing is, it will just do the same thing which it was doing previously as well. So that gets populated, so similar to how it was being done. So that's pretty much it, like how to use observables for sending back responses from, let's say, an API call using NS URL session, or even Alamofire, anything you can. So this is one of the ways of using RxSwift to send responses. So okay, I had mentioned that after the request response, if there is a completion, we are calling the complete. So as soon as the call is completed, it also triggers dispose. That's the reason you are also seeing this print. So no memory leaks, it just disposes of after its work is done. So this is the way you do observables using RxSwift for a response back from, let's say, Alamofire or something. So hope you enjoyed this episode. Until the next time with something new for this year, hope to see you soon.